After doing 2 different playthroughs on Dishonored 2 and spending about at least 30 hours playing this magnificent game, I now feel confident in providing you guys with a solid review, and to explain to you guys why this game should be on your shelf if you like games like Deus Ex and Bioshock. The type of artistry and game design that you're seeing with games like Dishonored are now branded by the gaming community as an immersive sim, which is a clunky term for a subgenre of first-person games that take the shape and form of Deus Ex, Thief, and most notably the iconic Bioshock. And the salient features of these type of games would be having complicated or philosophical and detailed narrative for you to absorb the story and ponder about, telling the story using the environment, giving the player some sort of control as to how they go about exploring that environment, and allowing them to stop, take in the scenery, and just make lots of observations. And of course, to do that successfully, you need to commit to a higher level of artistry than other games will command. So having established what an immersive sim is, let's see how Dishonored 2 fares against the other big boys in the genre. First up, the story. The story takes place 15 years after the events of Dishonored 1, and the game adopts the ending where Emily ascends the throne and rules with Corvo by her side. The game dubs that point in time in the story as the Golden Era of Dunwall. The outcome adopted by the devs also entailed Corvo sparing Dowd, which then sets up the event seeing Dowd rescuing Emily from the clutches of the witches in the DH1 DLC. This effectively prevents Delilah possessing Emily and using her as a puppet as the ritual gets interrupted by Dowd. But Delilah obviously finds another way to usurp you 15 years later, which she does at the beginning of Dishonored 2. As you are getting dethroned, you are made to pick between one of 2 characters to play for the rest of the campaign. The story then turns into a simple tale about you reclaiming the throne, with the main focus on how. How you morally do it will shape and determine your game's outcome. The game uses the same high chaos and low chaos formula for not only determining your specific campaign's outcome, but how the game unfolds leading up to that as well. It is actually interesting to see how different your campaign will be when playing the game with different playstyles. Not only will the campaign's substance change, so too will its aesthetic and atmosphere. Player choice in the campaign will also affect the cause and outcomes of certain factions. Player choice can also affect other characters' temperaments and attitudes towards you, which invokes the player to reflect on their actions at certain points in the game. The main story really shines when it comes to some of its characters like Jindosh, the Outsider, and Delilah. Some of the other characters and moments in the game felt quite bland and boring, but this was easily forgivable given how gorgeous the game's design was. Where the story lacked in some parts, the design most certainly compensated. I have quite a bit to say about the design of this game, but more on that later. Besides that, Dishonored 2 was just your bog standard reclaim the throne and seek revenge or justice story. There was not a lot of subtext or intellectually stimulating discourse into some of its themes. There were some moral contradictions of the protagonist hinted at, but at best they only remained hints or mere lip service, and the game just segues on, which was a shame, as that was the moment things could have gotten interesting narratively speaking. It is not that the story wasn't good, it was just not executed as well as its other areas of design. But then I feel weird for saying that because the game actually has tons of really interesting lore and backstory you can read up on via its collectibles. As always, the readable collectibles or audio recordings sprawled throughout the map really gave the world the intrigue it deserves. Although, I did feel at times that there were too much reading material and not enough recorded ones. Most of the allure and intrigue of this world were waiting to be picked up, read, be discovered, or observed, as opposed to being exposed in the main plot. Therefore, its story exposition I felt was high risk, and the thought that people are not getting the full story by not reading these things really makes me anxious about the game's reception. Destiny did something similar by putting its lore behind a readable deck of cards which you can access on Bungie.net online, and that just made the story appear thinner than it actually is. Let me give you a specific example of this. After hearing about some of the hardships Delilah went through, I felt sympathy and a bit of compassion for her, and it evoked a level of reflection on the story I would not have done had I not probed the game's story even more. I felt that my appetite for the lore was being filled by the readable collectibles and recordings, which although I thoroughly enjoyed, it really stopped the continuity of the game, and at times I felt like skipping over some of them as I wanted to just progress with the story. It is almost as if the developers have lost sight of the fact that people want to play the game and do not want to be reading large chunks of well-written story. However, as said before, this is not to say that the story isn't good, it's just that its exposition could have been better. My time spent with some of the villains and their beautifully crafted levels were the main highlights of my Dishonored 2 playthroughs. It was more of the design that I was infatuated with than the story. It felt like my engagement with the lore was enjoyable, as opposed to being in the lore itself. I did not really care that much for Emily or Corvo's story, despite having immeasurable fun playing Dishonored 2. As always, the mysterious outsider in the story makes a return, and as per usual, he appears to question and constantly evaluate your decisions. I went for the high chaos, guns blazing, kill everyone approach, and it was interesting to see his attitude towards that. If not overtly, the game subtly brings your own decisions into questions in various ways. As I was approaching to kill 2 guards, I recalled overhearing how one of them did not want their children growing up in Karnaca, indicating that he knows that the town is bad and full of corrupt people. It made me think if all the characters I am slaying deserve the death I would sentence them to.
What's the matter? You look pissed off.
Yeah, you bet I am. I just got the answer about my transfer inland. Relocation denied.
Look on the bright side. Pay is better here than anywhere else. And we get to do the job how we see fit. Nobody's pestering us with forms and procedures. You collect the fees we want and give out the beatings when they're needed.
I just don't want my kids growing up here. It's too dangerous.
Then reapply next month. The command staff changes constantly. New officers, new rules. And spread a few coins here and there among the officers.
Especially when they're feeling some sort of moral guilt. Maybe they had no choice but to carry out such atrocities. The game was really good at being thought-provoking in this regard. Much like the first, the outsider comes across as neutral, giving you and the other characters the mark and superhuman powers, treating the world as some sort of playground experiment. After the outsider gives you your powers, he then observes you with keen interest, seeing how you will go about reclaiming the throne. We learn a little bit more about the outsider in this installment, but there are still many questions regarding him in the void. Verdict on the story: it was good, but its exposition wasn't done as well as the other areas of design. I felt that the extremely detailed design of the game, some of its villains, and discoverable literatures were doing a better job, which should prompt the devs on focusing more on its exposition. When an audio recording tells the story better than the actual game's plot exposition, then you need to rethink things. Oh, and there are far too many things to read. There needs to be more audio diaries. If Bioshock 1 could have done it, considering their budget constraints, Dishonored has no excuse. Audio diaries enables the players to keep on playing whilst exploring and absorbing the story. They need to get with the times. The excuse that, oh, there are many books and actual parchments of paper and literature, that excuse is not good enough. You can have it read aloud by a voice actor. I also didn't like the fact that I left with the same amount of questions regarding the outsider after beating Dishonored 2, which is making me think if the game is mimicking Half-Life 2's G-Man, adopting a more demonic and Lovecraftian guise. Next up, the design. This is the moneymaker for Dishonored, and will be the area that has the most praise. In fact, this is probably 90% of the reason why this game is a huge success. Chuck the main plot out of the window. I feel that it is really important not to narrowly categorize the game's artistic style out of fear people might associate it too much with one thing, but some buzzwords might help partly describe it. The game looks like a painting at times, and it has a Victorian, steampunk and Dickensian vibe going to it. From one moment, the game looks colourful, sunny, briny and vivacious with gorgeous backdrops and scenery. Then it can be gritty, dark and haunting, but in a cool fantasy way. My favourite dark setting was the Royal Conservatory, as it's totally how you would imagine a conservatory full of witches to be like.
Let me help you. Someone there.
You really get an immersive sim experience when roaming through Karnaka's dark streets or exploring its buildings and houses for runes, secrets and loot. The game is very good at being atmospheric, visually and sound-wise. You feel like you are there in a lifelike world. A good amount of story is also told by the environments, be it public announcements or demonic songs being sung aloud as you warily navigate a haunted town. As you explore the world, side quests and side story plots can also be triggered, which makes roaming around feel like a rewarding experience. It also triggers more curiosity on the player to go about and look for more. The most impressive thing about this game is the details. The game levels are so ridiculously detailed that you are left wondering if a human mind is capable of knowing so much. You go and inspect a table and you can see so many items you can interact with and observe. It is amazing how so much storytelling is done just from the environment. The true jewel of the game that really exemplifies the high level of artistry in its design is when you go to encounter Jindosh. Kirin Jindosh is one of the villains of the game. He is an evil genius inventor that has produced an army of mechanical soldiers, which you may have seen in the game's media. When you go to his mansion perched high in the mountains above Karnaka, you see the ingenuity of the character and his exceedingly bizarre mansion. Everything he has surrounded himself in is a work of genius or some sort of cool invention. You step inside and you are greeted with the following message. Things start feeling weird, but in a pleasant something great is coming up way.
Welcome to my home, stranger. The door is always open to those with the will to pass the threshold. If you're here by appointment, then proceed and bide your time. Otherwise, I'd be remiss if I didn't inform you about the defensive mechanisms employed here, which are quite formidable. Many have entered without invitation, for reasons as myriad as the fish in the ocean. But of those who've dared to explore further, very few have found their way back out.
It appears that Jindosh habitually greets and invites strangers to come in, so that he can observe them navigating his house to see if they can make it past obstacles and deadly mechanical soldiers. Movements are tracked with pressure-sensitive flooring. You then slowly start to realize that his whole mansion is transformable. His mansion consists of mechanically movable set pieces, which you can rearrange. Yes, you can rearrange his mansions at the flick of a switch and be bedazzled by how fucking awesome his mansion is. In fact, it almost looks like a scene from Inception at times, as the room falls in and out. Again, imagine the level of detail and knowledge required to have the whole guy's house be like this. Seriously, I need to know what drugs the developers are taking. At times, I would just flick the switch just simply to admire the creativity unfold in front of me. This is the level of creativity Dishonored playfully presents, and it's just a very clear example of one of the main strengths of the development team, is just their creativity and design. In fact, you can be really clever and use the whole mansion's mechanism and machinery to your advantage, by using it to climb to the top of the mansion through the temporary gaps that would pop up as the room switches. In fact, there are so many ways you can get past and assassinate this villain. It just shows the level of enjoyment this game can offer to those willing to experiment and think outside the box. It gives you the sense that there are endless possibilities throughout the game, which leads to the next point. There are a myriad of ways you can proceed to an objective. In fact, on my way out from an objective, I would often discover alternative ways that could have made my assassinations way more easier, funnier, or more exciting. This accommodating vibe also extends to each assassination, where you can choose to assassinate lethally or non-lethally. I made the assumption of assuming non-lethal is the least just way of killing someone, but having looked at some of the things you can do to your targets if you take them down non-lethally, I take that back. In fact, in some encounters, it felt more merciful to just kill them, because what you do to them, going down the non-lethal path was just outright cruel. Another highlight from the design is a device that you can use in a particular level. The device lets you switch timelines to the past or present. You can open up the device's lenses, which also gives you a very small view of the other timeline as you remain in your current one. This enables you to choose the right times for popping back and getting a kill, to then pop back out, leaving the guards figuring out what the fuck is going on. This is the level of artistry and creativity you'll be seeing with this game. There are plenty more to drone on about, but I'll say no more on it. Verdict on the design? The design makes Dishonored what it is. Seeing the level of detail in the game's internal and exterior decor, level design, character design, multiple plot lines and game mechanics, it is no wonder why this game is a success. Next up, progression. As said at the beginning, Immersive Sims have an element of progression, so we'll also examine this bit of the game. The game's progression system is very much like the first. Collect runes as currency to buy upgrades and enhancements to your abilities. I have to say, be sure to really go out of your way and collect a good amount of these runes. I made the error of assuming I can get a good amount of upgrades by only collecting the runes that are near the main path I am taking, which resulted in my first playthrough being shy of 2 signature moves of Emily's. And I was kinda gutted that I didn't get them because they were really shown off in the trailers and they looked really cool. Corvo has his usual tree from Dishonored 1, but with some extensions and tweaks. Now I'm going to showcase you Emily's abilities using the Bethesda footage, primarily because I really can't play or do not play the game as well as they do in the trailers, and that's something that's a problem with me. You can replicate it though, they haven't missold you anything. If you go on YouTube you can see really good players make montages of the kills. Anyways, let's take a look at some of the abilities that you can purchase with the runes. Now the first move is quite overpowered when you use it. It puts you in a constant stealth form, and you can just go around doing really cooler takedowns than you usually can. The next one is Doppelganger. People have been really creative with this one. What they do is you can stack domino with the Doppelganger, so you can, like for instance, get 6 people, attach them to the Doppelganger using domino, and then just either kill your own Doppelganger or just have the group kill the Doppelganger, and then they share the same fate. Mesmerize is quite good. It's actually got me past so many areas because it's quite overpowered. And Far Reach you've probably seen throughout. This doesn't really need any explanation. It's like a hook, grapple hook. And you can also use it to vault people towards you as well. Transposition, you can also use your Doppelganger as a teleporter. You can also get physical enhancements to gear and weaponry, which can be bought from the black market, but they are usually ammo capacity upgrades and they're not that significant. One thing that I really liked in this Dishonored was that when I did my stealthy or pacifist playthrough, I noticed how equally easy or fun it was. This was because the devs improved and increased the feasibility of such playstyles. You can now choke people out mid-combat after a successful parry, which is useful for those people that play stealthily, because, you know, at times you will get caught, and now you can actually just non-lethally get yourself out of the situation. Bone charms are very much like how they were in the first one. Bone charms give you buffs that you can equip and switch out with others whenever you want. The main difference this time was that they have implemented a bone charm crafting system, which I felt really missed the point. What this allows you to do is to have multiple bone charms you equip and really like crafted into one, so you have multiple buffs coming from one slot, sort of like crafting a super bone charm. What I would have liked to see is us having the ability to dismantle existing bone charms to make randomly generated new ones, but oh well. I strongly recommend you go for the signature moves and its associated upgrades instead of wasting runes on the bone charms crafting, if you do end up playing as Emily. Other than that, once you get a repertoire of abilities, you're all set in experimenting and coming up with your own ways of getting past foes, obstacles and challenges, engineering your very own way of killing people, and this bit was really fun. Every time you do it, it's just such a delight. This is some of the shit you can actually pull off. Literally go on YouTube and look at kill montages. People have actually put together footages of them just chain killing everyone, and it's almost cinematic the way they edit it and stuff. It's fucking amazing. Combat. At times the combat feels great as you are blocking and parrying foes, trying to time that sweet strike in between the barrage of attacks. The game's controls were done really well to the point where you are wielding and using 2 different things at once with very little difficulty. A truly delightful level of fluidity and dexterity at work here. Executions are still my favourite thing about Dishonored, but the best thing is coming up with really absurd ways of killing your targets using your abilities. The game has a good variety of enemies that make you switch up your strategies and playstyle, keeping you on your toes at all times. 1 minute you are fighting a really durable and tank-like mech soldier, to then fight a teleporting swashbuckling witch who summons and casts a bunch of annoying stuff at you, etc.
Blood and biscuits. What? Sister, are you? Huh? I won't let her see you in the void.
Oh no, no. Get back in the hole. Get back in the hole. Get back in the hole.
Enemy encounters feel quite challenging, even on easy, which makes clever use of abilities, weapons, and spell chains much more rewarding, fun, and sort of mandatory. Anyways, conclusion. Dishonored 2 is another high standard and quality immersive sim to join the ranks of Bioshock and Deus Ex. If you like a game that relies on narrative, insanely detailed artistry, storytelling through its environment, and a game that allows you to explore, absorb, and journey at your own pace, then this is certainly up your street. Score 9.0 out of 10.
Impossible!
Come back here!